Good afternoon, Atlanta. Listening to News and Talk 1380 WAOK, the voice of the community, the people passionate in politics, podcast edition. I am on the road. I got some really exciting things to talk about with you guys today to explain why we are pre-recording. So we're recording this on Friday. Of course, we're going to talk about the things going on with the Speaker of the House vote, the kind of crazy week in politics. But I want to share some really important and great news with you guys. So as you guys have known, we've been talking about for probably the last couple years on this show, what form reparations should take for the African American community. Some people are in favor of monetary reparations, a check going out to everybody. I've always been an advocate for a semi-autonomous region. As they would say, a region of the country where African Americans can move to, where they own land, where they own property, they have ports, they have airports, they have shopping, they have communications, they have infrastructure, etc. But a self-governing area, so that we'll be able to control the politics and economics, not just of a community, but of a fully fledged state. A state they'll be able to engage in foreign trade, that will be able to have its own security apparatus, that will be able to control its own laws, very similar to what we see in other countries where they semi-autonomous regions exist. One of the places would be, as we've talked about earlier this year, the area of Nagorno-Karabakh, which is located between Armenia and Azerbaijan, where we're seeing ethnic tensions arising there. I think that the best form of reparations would be land and freedom and self-determination. As I've said previously, they could give us $1 million apiece on Monday, then Friday say $1 million is worth $1, and now we done signed away all of our rights. But if you have access to land, if you have access to autonomy, then that gives you the access to a future and self-determination, which of course is the entire conceptualization around Black nationalism. Black nationalism was never about getting a check from white people. It was about the ability to have self-determination. It's very difficult to do that when you are fractured and distributed throughout the country, and therefore I think that an area that we controlled on our own will be very important. Which brings us to why we are on the road. I'm working on my first documentary, and we're going to be doing a documentary on semi-autonomous regions around the world, areas that are either currently breaking away or have broken away or in the process of breaking away, and how they're going to be structuring their government, how are they going to be working towards this idea of having self-governance while still within the coverture of a larger state. The first place I'll be visiting is Catalonia. So while this show is airing on Sunday, I'll be arriving in Catalonia in order to talk to some public officials, to look at the area, to talk about the history. This is was formerly part of the Umayyad Empire, the caliphate which took over Spain during the Middle Ages. The Spanish ruled, or the Black Umayyads ruled that area for over 700 years. The Moorish invasions would be under Tariq the Moor. And that area went back and forth until the Reconquista. But even today, the Catalonia still considers itself very much separate from Spain, separate from the rest of the country. And therefore, there have been referendums, and they are attempting to break away and become a semi-autonomous region where they control their own economics. They can use their own language. The first Catalonian speaker actually used their native language on the floor of the parliament there in Spain recently. So I'm going to play some news reports on that later, just to kind of explain what we're doing there. Then later, I'll be visiting Corsica. Corsica, of course, is the birthplace of Napoleon. Up until the 1760s, it was a territory of Italy. Thereafter, it became territory of France, was controlled by the British for a period of time. Currently is in French hands, and that region also is attempting to break away from mainland France to become a semi-autonomous region. Indeed, Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, recently visited Corsica about a week ago to talk about this issue of becoming semi-autonomous, where France will still control the foreign policy, the military aspects, but the people there will be able to speak their own language, the Corsican language. They will be able to control their own commerce. They'll be able to trade with both Italy and France and any other nation. They could control immigration. They could make their own laws. And the voices of the people there would no longer have to be filtered through Paris, and the economics would no longer have to be filtered through Paris. They will be able to have self-determination, the ability to grow and prosper on their own. I also will be going to Toulon in France, which is a area in the south of France, a little bit kind of off from, from Marseille, kind of closer to Spain. And then you have Saint-Tropez and Cannes and Nice, those areas. Toulon is an area which is experiencing large amounts of African migrants coming across the Mediterranean. And I want to speak with some of the migrant groups there. We have an issue on our southern border here in the U.S., but in the southern parts of Europe, they're also experiencing issues with African migrants, and those African migrants are now demanding rights, demanding freedom, demanding services. And I want to talk to them to find out exactly how they plan on building a life and building a society for themselves on this new land. And as we've talked about before, the colonial powers were more than happy to rape and rob and pillage Africa for generations. And now those people come and show up and say, well, you took all of our stuff, so we're here. And they're exceedingly upset about that. So I want to talk to people who are in the diaspora, who are fighting through many of these issues at the same time, concurrent to what we are dealing with here. And I think we're also probably going to try to head over to Italy, probably not Rome, because Rome is a little cliche, but I do want to talk to people who are experiencing the rise in fascism that are currently taking place in Italy. We've talked previously about Giorgio Meloni and the neo-Mussolini fascist groups that are rising in Italy, and we're seeing those groups proliferate. If you think Trumpism is simply an American product, it is a product that is existing worldwide. We're seeing increasingly authoritarian right-wing governments are rising throughout Europe, and we need to understand the plights of our brothers and sisters who are existing and living through that, and how they can create their own spaces, their own land, their own territory, their own communities that are self-governing. So I'm finally starting to take this conceptualization around what we've been talking about far more seriously and trying to put a formula around it so that we can really have a proposal in place, so when it comes time, and the time will come soon, to have our discussion with the powers that be in this country about what exactly the structure of reparations will be, that it won't simply be disparate groups. I don't want I think the worst thing that can happen would be for this to turn into a Chappelle Show skit, that all of a sudden they say, well, we're finally willing to listen on this issue of reparation for the African American community, and we simply show up and we ain't got our stuff together. We don't have our ducks in a row. I know the rapper Sexy Red this week. Oh, she had a hell of a week. Let's just talk about that. But the rapper Sexy Red this week, they was on an interview on a podcast, and she said, I support Trump. The hood supports Trump because he gave out free checks, and he started letting people out of jail. He let people out of prison, and he used to tell jokes on people. Imagine if they asked us what we wanted for reparations, and that was our response. How many people in this country do you think, how many black folks in this country you think will take a $1,400 check and sign a piece of paper saying they could never talk about race again, and all the civil rights laws will be off the books, all the voting rights laws will be off the book? Hell, you can repeal the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment if you send a lot of people in this country a $1,400 or $1,500 check right now. I think that our conservative friends, are the people who oppose reparations, just don't quite understand how easily you can buy off a large portion of our community. Hell, you can send some people a pile of scratch-off tickets, and they'd be ready to sell out everything that we have, all the equity we've built in this country. So this is why we have the National Reparations Convention coming up. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on in the show. But when we're talking about this issue of being autonomous, of having control over our communities, having control over our own plot of land. The idea is called the New Black Israel, having the same deal here in America for black folks that Israel has where they are, where you have international support, where you have trade deals, where you have commerce, where you have major corporations headquartered, but where you are in control of the politics and the economics and everything around that. And you'd be amazed how many black folks are very afraid of that idea. They look at the poverty and the crime that exists in some black cities, and they say, I don't want to be in a country like that. And they look at the images you see on the media that where they show you nothing but death and destruction in Africa and other countries that are run completely by black folks, and they say, well, I don't know if I want to be a part of all that. In reality, that's just the brainwashing of white supremacy that has made you think that you can't do for yourself, and you can't build for yourself, you can't have for yourself. So I want to talk to people around the globe that have done exactly that and have been able to put those things together, or in the process of putting those things together to find out exactly how they work. I want to bring that information back to you guys, put it together into a documentary. So we're going to be on the road for the next week or so. I'm going to try to record a show for next week while we are on the road to make and try to bring you some live interviews from people across the globe. I haven't figured out the translation part yet, so I'm actually going to have to try to find some English speakers. Y'all know me, I don't do a lot of planning, but we're going to make this happen. We're going to talk more about this after the break. Don't call in. Again, this is pre-recorded. You're listening to News and Talk 1380 WAOK, the voice of the community.